reaction is to say, I can't because. So someone might say, all right, Jill, I need you to just jump out that window right now. And my reaction, of course, would be, well, I can't, because if I jump out that window, I'm actually going to die. But if you reframe everything and you say, I can if, I could say, well, I can jump out that window if you help me build wings, or if you put something below there to catch me. And so one of the things that I've done is I've worked with teams over the years to make a list of all the things that we can't do, and then reframe each statement into I can if, so that you can start to think through what specific things you need to change or reframe to make it something that is possible. And I think it's a very similar construct, but it's all about getting people to start thinking that we are accountable to our own actions. And if you believe in yourself and if you decide this is something you're going to do, you're going to do it. And I need to try the I don't go to the gym, I don't skip the gym thing. I think that might
Your point is interesting, because we used to do that. Occasionally we would play a game like that in manufacturing, where machine uptime is obviously very important. And we made books, and there were about 10 different pieces of equipment in this long assembly line that would manufacture that, and things would go down. And when one goes down, the rest go down. And so anyway, we used to play a game, and it was what would you need to do to ensure that your equipment never shut down?
Yes.
And they would say, well, that's impossible. I'd say, no, what would you do? And so we would go through these lists, and sometimes it would just be, hey, one person from the crew is going to work through lunch and take their lunch after, and they're going to replace this, this, and this, and it became this little game of, well, how would I prevent those things from happening? Which is kind of like what you just said. And it actually took you from, how do I get 2 or 3% more? And it was like, okay, if we're at 93% efficiency, how do we get to 100, which is a much bigger jump? But it was just a reframing, which is a lot like your if, because in effect, what I was doing is saying, if your machines were never going to shut down, what would you need to do? And it's a really cool way to spin that around. And you can use that with your workout stuff. If your goal is to not miss a workout, what would you need to do to ensure that happens? And you can construct your life and your schedule around a way that does work.
Yeah.
If you want to.
If you want to.
Yeah.
And I love the statement that Jeff made earlier around, when we asked about, do you use the word I do? I love that, because I don't know about you, Jeff, Jill, Chris, the longer I think about doing something, the less likely I am to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
This is news on to the next point.
Like you just act on things.
Yep.
I can tell you from personal experience over the last 12 months that I've done a number of things that I wouldn't have thought were possible doing if I had spent time ruminating on it and thinking about it and balancing, different objectives. You just do things, more often than not, they work out. And if they don't, you learn some really good lessons along the way.
I can't remember where I got this from, so just know that it was not me, and then I'm not claiming it. But there was a procrastination tip. I think it was one of the co-founders of Pinterest, but he basically said, if there's something I'm putting off, which to me is a sign that I'm thinking about it too much, and in my mind it's become too big and too daunting, and how will I ever start? And that becomes that weird little spiral that you can't get out of. His thing was, I'll commit to doing it for 5 minutes, because you can do anything for 5 minutes. And if at the end of that 5 minutes, if I'm not feeling it, if it's not working, if I'm whatever it is, I give myself permission to bail. But usually what happens, as you guys know, once you start, all that stuff goes away. You get into it, you start to make some progress, something goes well, that's motivating, goes back to my book kind of. But that little 5-minute rule is a really cool one. And to be honest, I have something I've been putting off, and I need to remember the 5-minute rule, because I'm stuck in that cycle of, while I'm thinking about it, it seems too big. Where would I even start? I don't know what to do. And you're right. The more you think about it, sometimes the worse it is. You would think thought and planning would help, but actually sometimes they're a hindrance.
No, I don't read. I think that's one of my biggest strengths, to be honest, is we spoke about this on the podcast, Jeff, how, Shane, my business partner, always says to me, like, you come up with all these ideas and you just randomly do it. Like we said, we're going to do a podcast. Let's just do it. I didn't Google and say, I just did it. I was like, let's just do a podcast. Why not? Right. And then same with the live show. Let's just do a live show. And then we did it. Everything, really. Every sport I've ever learned, every skill I've ever learned, I've just do it and then fail a lot.
Right.
It's also the fun part, because when you start succeeding, as you say in your book, a lot of that becomes the motivator to keep going. And every one of those small wins, as you do it, keeps you motivated, right? And
you just have to be, all you really have to do is not be afraid to struggle at first. Because and I think that's the planning trap we fall into, is that, wow, if I'm going to do this, I need to be ready. I need to be prepared. I need to know what I'm doing. I need to do all this stuff,
avoid failure,
so that I don't fail, because, my time is so precious and valuable that I've got to roll. But actually the best way to do it is to do it, where you just start it and then you figure it out. That didn't work very well. And that didn't go very well, but I know what to do now, and I know what to do now. And it gets fun to grow and learn.
Yeah, I get more excited now.
I have a question for Matt. Matt, you hung a cliffhanger out there before, and you said that over the past 12 months, you've done a whole bunch of things that you probably wouldn't have done if you overthought them. Your massive following who's watching today wants to know what some of those things are.
Yeah, it's time to put up or shut up.
Jill always puts Matt on the spot. I love it.
I've never shut up before, so this will be easy. I think for me, Jill, the best example would be the documentary project we started in Mexico City, then in Nashville. If people knew how little planning went into creating a documentary, I know my editors and my videographers were pulling their hair out on a pretty much a daily basis when I didn't have a script. We didn't have a shooting schedule. We didn't really have a goal other than we wanted to get really, really good content and meet really awesome people. And then we wanted to mix it in with some B-roll and some testimonials along the way. That was kind of it. We shot it over 3 days in each of the cities, and we have a really great product. And I actually think that when you look back at the footage, which I'm looking forward to releasing in the coming months, it gives a really authentic take from the people that were joining us as well, because the guests would send me emails and LinkedIn messages. Matt, what are you going to ask me about? I'm going to ask you 3 questions. What's your story? And then we'll figure out the rest from there. We never got to the other 2 questions. And we had more than enough content from people asking and talking about themselves and their backgrounds and their challenges and trials and tribulations. We didn't need to have a structured process. Whereas when I've done this in the past, and I'm in HR, so I interview for a living, when you create a structured interview, it creates that tone of rigidness and staleness, and it feels inauthentic, and no one's having a good time. So I really wanted to strip that away and just do something, and I think it led to a much better final product.
That's something that at one of the Inc. events, Mark Cuban was there, and he wasn't going to speak, but he was going to be interviewed on stage by the president of Inc. And that's Eric Schoenberg. And we were in the green room, and Eric said, "Hey, let me go over some of the stuff I wanted to talk about." And Cuban said, "No, I don't want to know a thing. I'd rather be fresh. I'd rather you ask me stuff and me just respond." And he said, "If I don't have an answer, I'll tell you." And it turned out really, really well. And then there was another one later in the day, and I won't say who that was, but he wanted to know exactly what was going to be talked about, and he wanted structure, and he wanted to prepare, and he had his team off to the side helping him craft his answers. And it was the stiffest and most uninteresting thing, because it was all talking points, and nobody wants talking points. So if you just said, "What's your story?" That's a really cool, that forces people to go, "What is my story?" And don't ask me what my story is. Not now, because I'm not prepared.
I have a question for you, Jeff. This question is going to set you right back to pre-taping. What do you stand for?
What do I stand for?
Chill.
You know what? I didn't even think about that. And I promised myself I would. Let's see. Probably what it comes down to in this context is I stand for people saying, "I would like to be more than I am, and who I am is more than enough. All I need is a few tools and a little bit of guidance to help me get going, and then I can chart my own course and I can be successful however you decide to define success." And it should be different for different people. But if there's one thing that I truly believe in, I believe in that. If for no other reason, then again, I'm a bad haircut, nasal twang dude from Western Virginia who has managed to meet some really cool people and do some fun things. And so if I can, so many other people can too.
I think that your haircut is probably very good, but when you wear the headphones, it's hard to tell.
That's part of the point of the headphones.
Yeah, it's working.
If there was a way to have a headphone mask, then I'd be, the world would be a better place. Face made for radio, baby.
I've never done the headphones myself, but I want to kind of.
Jill refused to put on headphones when I first spoke to her about coming on the show. Jill was like, "Nah." No,
I don't think it's a look. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Jill.
What do you stand for?
Oh, I have no idea. I was thinking about that while you asked Jeff, and I don't know, honestly. For me, personally, from a selfish standpoint, all I think about every day is learning new things and getting excited about new projects and thinking about how, from the show point of view, all I think about all day is how can I create content and that will give value to our audience. That's all I think about. So before I do a post on LinkedIn, before I write a post, before I create a product, my first question to myself is saying, is this adding value to our customers and our audience? If not, it might be the best thing in the world, but I don't post it and don't put it out there. So that's the kind of one thing so that's for the audience. That's all I think about on a daily basis, whether it's our events, our podcast, our live show. That's the question I ask every single day. I even ask members of our team, even Ivan, when he's going to post next to me, or Shane. So is that adding value? If not, then stop doing that.
Well, that is an approach also that sets you apart from lots of people that create content, because the average person says, what's in this for me?
Exactly.
What will I get out of that? And then how can I send that out there? And nobody listens to that, and nobody reads it, and nobody cares. And so, that is the way to go. And if I may jump in, Jill, let's ask you one. How do you define success? Because I said success should be different for different people. How do you define success?
You're going to try to get me, Jeff, but
I'm not trying to get you. You should know this. Otherwise, you're just doing things in a scattershot way with no point. So
I don't know what I'm going to title this show now. I don't know what the title of the show is going to be.
I'm glad you asked, because you talked a few minutes ago about just sort of believing in yourself and going out and doing it. And I'm probably a prime example of that, where I have spent 21 years leading large HR. Oh, sorry, Matt, 15. I just aged myself. But many.
You started when you were 8.
Thank you. Yes. Leading large HR organizations where the success metrics were always defined for me. And I have just literally within the past year stepped out on my own, and I am legitimately making it up as I go along. And I'm doing a lot of the things that you talked about, which is just trying things and just putting myself out there and posting content, just as Chris said, and we talk about this a lot, the three of us, putting things out that I think will really help other people and add value to other people. And I'm hoping to be doing more speaking and more coaching around these topics. For me personally, and my partners know this, what is success to me is being a person that is so confident and impactful in the world that I'm setting an example for my children. And what I really want to be when I think about, when I become the top of the list for I can't even be on the 40 under 40 anymore. This is really bad. But when I get on the 100 under 100.
No, we're going to put you on a Thinkers 50 list. Thinkers 50. I
want to be on the 100 under 100 list. And I want to be out there for a female executive entrepreneur who went out and did something on her own, but more than anything stood up for working families, working caregivers, and really showed that success can be having it all. It just looks different and needs to be balanced in a different way. So that is what my version of success will look like. And I have, I think, a long road to hoe.
I always think that's an interesting question for people. This will sound terrible, but I'm going to say it anyway. But I have friends that are teachers, high school teachers, and they complain constantly about the pay. And so I totally agree that teachers are underpaid, as are firefighters and police. There are lots of professions that are underpaid. However, when you go into the high school teaching profession, at least where I live, you know what you're going to make because it's public. It's a state job. You can go and look. And so you knew going in, this is what you were going to make. And so we have these conversations where I say, look, what do you like about teaching? And they talk about the fulfillment and working with the kids and stuff like that. And I said, okay, well, then there's 2 lines. One line is your salary, whatever that may be. The other is the fulfillment and happiness that you derive from your work. And those things have to cross at a point where you are happy. And so we all do things. I've done jobs that I hated doing, but the pay was good. And so I said, okay, I will do this. The satisfaction's low, pay is high, I'm good. I've done other jobs where I made almost nothing, but I really enjoyed it, got something from it, learned something from it, and that trade-off was okay. And so that whole success barometer, so to speak, it really is a matchup of what do I want financially and what do I need personally, and how do I make those two things click? And so for me, it's that balance is, am I happy and fulfilled and enjoying this, and also making enough money to at least be able to make some financial choices and not stress all the time, about my life. And so anyway, that usually is where I end up with people. And it's that disconnect. A lot of times when people are unhappy, it's because that there's a disconnect between that revenue pay side and what I'm getting out of this person.
Yeah, I normally get in trouble when I talk to people about that.
Well, I do too.
Because my friends,
I'm just going to
my mum's a teacher, right. And when I was 18, I was making more money than her as a sales executive, and she always used to complain, and I used to say to her, well, you chose to be there, right? It used to get me in trouble all the time. And it's similar with my wife now, like when we all come home and moan about our jobs, let's be honest, guys, at some point. And she was complaining to me about I was like, hey, but you chose to be there, like you chose to be there. So it's very interesting when you step back and look at it. One of the things I wanted to talk about, now
there are, before I end that, there are positives of that though, because my daughter she has a master's and she works for a community services organization, and she don't make much money. Those people don't make much money, but she loves it. And so she's happy with that balance because the pay is not so great, but the fulfillment side works for her and she's really happy. So you can be there. Mm-hmm. You just have to decide for yourself, what is the balance that I'm looking for? And if it's not right, you have to find a way either to make the fulfillment side better so you're happy with the lower number, or you find something else that gives you a higher number. You have to play that game. Mm-hmm. So I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm just saying if you are unhappy, disclaimer. Look at your balance and figure out ways that you can make that work for you.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to point out that this can change throughout your life.
Right? Absolutely.
We are all in different stages of our lives, and there are different points in your life where you can take a risk where you're having a little bit more personal fulfillment or less finance.
Yes.
Times that you need to focus in other directions. I think it's important for people to give themselves the freedom and the respect to go through those phases, that there are times when you need to kind of buck up and sometimes put money in the bank for something. And there's also times that, if there's a cliff, you got to jump off it because there might not be another cliff coming soon. So
right. Yep.
Things change over time.
Yep, absolutely.
I think that's something that graduates should always think about as well when they leave school, is not go after the money, but also go after the experiences while they're young. Try different companies, try different industries, different jobs, and taste as many different things as possible before you just go, these guys are going to pay me the most, which is basically what happens in most cases. But now it's changed a little bit. People are looking at, what's the culture like, what are the different benefits, stuff like that. But I wish I had that process when I was younger, because I definitely would have tasted more things rather than just going for the highest paying salary.
I took a really odd or different approach from that. I went to college and graduated, but I really liked manufacturing. And so there was a company, R. Donnelly was in town. There was a plant there that just started. And I looked and said, I like manufacturing and that place is going to grow and maybe I can grow with it. But I had nothing really to offer them other than labor. And so I went in and started as an entry-level worker on the shop floor, which was not a high-paying job and no prestige or anything. But I looked at it as, okay, but this is my way to get in. And if I work hard, there are places for me to go. And so the pay wasn't very good and the satisfaction wasn't very good at first either. But there was a horizon that I was looking at. And so I got my satisfaction from, if every day I'm doing what other people are not willing to do, I'm going to rise. And so that was where the fun came from.
Yeah, it's rare you're going to have people that have that foresight though, to look that far ahead. The other option was to go and work in jobs, which I interviewed for, which was with like 40-year-old men working in cubicles, which I'd love to be a 40-year-old man now. But at the time I looked at it and thought, no way. And so it was partly that as well. But nonetheless, I did look at it and say, wow, here's my chance. I'm willing to work hard. And my dad was very big on you pay your dues now and you pay them a long, long time. And maybe someday you'll get lucky and it pays off. And so I just kind of followed that. Jeff, one thing I want to talk to you about is serial achievers. You know, right? Something you talk about, and especially for the companies that listen to the show, we all have amazing talent in our organizations, but a big challenge is everyone's losing it to everyone else. Could you share, we've spoken about this before many times, how companies keep serial achievers in one segment of their organization or one function and then wonder why they get frustrated and leave. Could you talk about that and share some of your insights? Because I know you've interviewed many serial achievers over your time and for the book.
Yeah, in brief, this premise of a serial achiever is that, you know, we tend to put people into silos and say, okay, this guy's a really good programmer and he's really great at that. That's his path, and we're going to stay in that. And we as individuals tend to put ourselves in silos as well and say, okay, I've got to go all in on this one thing because specialization, you know, that's the way that you kick ass. And so, but yet most of us aren't made that way, and we like to do different things. And so if you get that, you know, you hire a young lady who's an awesome programmer and you've got her in that silo, she'll enjoy the success at first of, you know, finding her way. But there comes a time when you're like, okay, if talented people tend to look around and say, there's got to be other stuff, and I have more to offer than just this. And if you leave her there, she's going to find somewhere else where she can explore that. And so you are actually better off long-term saying, okay, if I shift her to something else she's interested in, she may not be as good at that as she was at this initially, but she'll grow and develop there, because people with good attitudes and that are smart and willing to learn, they get good at lots of stuff. And so I'm going to do that. That will give somebody else maybe a chance in that other role. And before long, I've got all these people who have dipped toes into lots of different waters and who are capable of achieving a whole lot of things as my organization evolves as well. So you can't expect an organization to evolve if you're not allowing the people that work in the organization to evolve. And so allowing them to be serial achievers gives you the chance, when you have changed and shifted, for your people to shift with you because they're ready. Or you're just going to have who you have at that moment because everybody's leaving and you're getting new plugs to fill in. Mm-hmm. I don't know any leaders that want to plug people in and leave them there. I don't think they want organizations that look like that, but that's what we create when you don't allow people to fill other roles. Mm-hmm. I know guys that run, I just was having lunch with a guy that runs he's got about 3,000 employees, and he was complaining that, you know, he doesn't have enough versatility and people aren't flexible and people aren't. He was whining about his teams basically. And I said, well, do you ever move them around? Do you ever let them move? Do you ever whatever? Oh no, we got a bunch of mission critical stuff we're doing and everybody's got to stay focused. And I was like, dude,
you just said the opposite.
You're creating what you say you do not want. And he said, well, that's really hard and it'll be expensive. I said, yeah, but how expensive it is to have to rehire? How expensive it is when people get bored and the person that was awesome is now just kind of phoning it in because they're bored.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest issues in organizations today, which is there is so much conversation about moving talent, and everybody knows that it's the right thing to do and the great thing to do and the way to retain your top people, and that your top people want to move around. But I can tell you there are more times than not that when it all comes down to it, when I would sit down with the leader of that department and say, I'm going to move Matt Burns now, that's when they're like, whoa, you can't move Matt Burns. He's on this huge project. We can't do it without him. And so we called it in our organization talent hoarding. It's talent hoarding. And unless what we found is unless it was actually tied to a metric for the manager, that the manager started to think with more of an enterprise mindset, that was a hurdle for us. That it was hard to get people to give up their best people and watch them move, even when they knew it was the right thing for the organization.
Yeah, I got in a little bit of trouble corporate wise, but I changed evaluations at one point when I was working in manufacturing. And one of the things that I put on the supervisor and manager's evaluations was how many of your folks got promoted in the last time period. And it was a metric, and some of them hated it, but I wanted it to be something where it's like, okay, if I want to be seen as successful in my job, I have to get my folks promoted. And it actually did work. It created other problems, as usually introducing new metrics and performance measurements does. But it was a good way to shake people up and say, okay, this is my job. Because that as a leader, that is your job. Your job is to not move people out, but move them up so that you've got more that you can move up.
Yeah, when I speak to HR leaders, and the reason I brought it up is the most successful chief HR officers I speak to, and they've been there, say 10 years, 20 years, every single one of them have worked in 10, 15 different functions throughout that time. You'll never, ever find a leader who's been in the company. In my experience, I've had hundreds of interviews where you'd never find someone who stayed in the same function, for the full 10 years. They just wouldn't do it. They'd leave. Right. And everyone, and also
not if you're good.
Not if you're good. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what
right.
I mean. No, not if you're good, right? And also the benefit of getting that wider exposure to all the different functions in your organizations when they get to the top. So I recently spoke to the chief HR officer of Bungie, a huge organization, and she'd worked in about 7 or 8 different functions: finance, operations, marketing. So when she became the vice president of the whole company, she now had experience. She understood exactly how the supply chain worked. So I know exactly how it works. I know exactly how the marketing and sales works, right? It's so important now. She has that view. And the innovation that comes from moving people around as well is something that people don't talk about enough. So I think it's
and the connections that you develop that you carry with you that allow you then when you're doing stuff to be able to dip back in and say, hey, I know this person, I know that person, let's put that together. That's as big a benefit as sometimes the experience is.
And as an individual, that's why it's so important to chase experiences, because by chasing experiences, you open yourselves up to different opportunities to learn and to challenge yourself in areas that you may not be comfortable. And that's where the growth occurs. So whether it's in a different function or it's a short-term assignment, those are opportunities as a leader to learn. We talked about money and benefits and all the status things. Those are all lagging measures. If you chase experiences and you set a goal for yourself that you want to make a lot of money, then you can achieve that through experience. If you want to have a big audience and have a lot of autonomy in your career, you can do that by having a lot of different experiences. Right. So I think people often chase those tactical, easy to quantify items when really it's experiences that is the leading measure, and those are lagging measures.
Right. Yep.
Hey, Matt, a lot of people will hear your advice that they should chase experiences and will be motivated by it, but they will be afraid in the end of, if I'm an expert at doing this, and I'm doing really, really well here, and I've been promoted here, and I'm making more money here, isn't it a bad idea? Or how do I go about doing something where I don't know if I'm going to succeed? So how do you coach a person through taking a huge risk and chasing an experience that is outside of their comfort zone?
So I'll give my answer, but I'd also love to hear Jeff's answer on this as well. I mean, for me, I always start with, is where you are right now all that good? I think we can trick ourselves into thinking that where we are is...
The grass is greener.
Comfortable, because it's predictable. The pain points, the frustrations, the challenges, but sometimes that other opportunity may actually be better, but it's really scary for everyone, including myself, to change. So I start with, is where you are right now all that great? And then I look forward for my own career in the future. I look at the skills and the competencies that are going to be more and more important in an increasingly digital world. And it is things like learning agility. It's emotional intelligence. It's items that you're not going to get through a textbook and that you're not going to get by spending 20 years in a single function. You need to have breadth of experience, and you need to have depth of knowledge in a number of different functional areas. So I start from that basic premise, Jill, which is ask yourself, is where you are today really where you want to be? And if the answer is yes, then don't even have the conversation, just move on. But if the answer is I'm not sure, or it's not where I want to be, well, that already is enough of impetus to do some research and do some exploration in another role. In the worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to the previous function you had expertise in, because you know you're going to have success there. But you may end up regretting not taking a chance 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, before Jeff jumps in, let me explain my personal experience with that. Because when I was a sales exec or sales manager for 10 years, I was so bored. I was in literally the exact person. I was in the same function for 10 years, since I was 17 years old. At 27, I was like, I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I was really scared to go to my CEO and ask, can I work a bit more with the marketing team or the operations? I want to understand more here. And the door just got shut in my face. Like literally was like, no, stick to your job. You're a salesperson. Why are you even talking to me about marketing and production? I was like, oh my God, that was a tough day. So what I did, which I don't know if is the best advice, but I'm going to share it anyway, is I just went ahead and did it. So basically what I did is I researched how to build a program, and do the operations and the production and the marketing. And I built a pitch, and I went in and asked the CEO and the marketing director for a meeting, and I pitched them the concept of building this new event. And I'd already had the speakers in place. I already had the structure. I knew exactly how it worked. I had this P&L ready, had, everything ready. I went in there, and then all of a sudden I was part of that conversation from there onwards. So, and I appreciate there's a lot of people aren't going to be willing to do that, but I just went and learned outside of the office how to do it myself. So rather than waiting for someone else to come and show me how to do it or give me permission, I thought there's a thing called the internet and Google out there and YouTube that you can learn anything you want if you want to do that. So, but I appreciate it's very scary for people to go to people in the business and ask for that, which is what you're saying, Jill, right? So it's what would you say, Jeff?
Well, there's two parts of that. The key that I think I would take away from what you just said is that when you want something else, say you're looking for a little extra, you don't want to just change jobs, but you want something extra, you need to go not with hey, I would really like to do this. Why don't you help me do that? You need to kind of go with a solution. And so you went in at the end of it with a solution and said, here's what I'd like to do. Here's how I would like to do that. And here's what benefit there will be to not just me, but to something in the organization from me participating in that. Because then it's like, okay, I can see that. If it's just about, I want to learn more about marketing because someday I'm going to be
I knew that wouldn't work
with a bunch of HR leaders. Well, nobody cares about that. But if you have a solution, so it's easy for the person to say yes, they don't have to think about it a lot because contrary to popular opinion, most leaders are not spending all day thinking about developing their folks, even though they should. And you have a solution and you have benefits for the organization, then it's really hard for the person not to say, you know what, that's really cool, especially if part of your solution is that you're willing to do a little extra work to get that done. If your solution is, and by the way, I'm going to half time on my normal responsibilities because we're going to go do this, well, it better be a kick-ass return on whatever investment is involved or you're not going to do it. But if you're willing to do the extra, who's going to say no to that? And you've also set yourself up as the person that shows initiative, that is willing to do a little bit of extra, that is willing to stretch. And I did something like that. I won't tell what it was because I know I've gone on too long already. But because I stretched and jumped into something else that wasn't my area, but I figured it out and did it, I became that guy that knew about that thing. And so when that came up organizationally, it was like, oh, we ought to get Jeff to do that because he's that guy, which was perfect. And it got me into new roles because I had become that guy. But I had to take responsibility for becoming that guy. It couldn't sit and wait until somebody gave that to me.
No one's going to give you permission, guys.
No.
Everyone else is sitting there waiting for people's permission. I realize that so often, both inside and outside of work, people are waiting for permission.
Well, not just permission, but they're waiting for the tools and the time and the resources and everything. It's like, if I'm going to do that, you have to give me all this stuff. And the better way to look at it, if for no other reason than because nobody else is you have to say, okay, I'm going to take all this stuff from myself or wherever, and I'm going to make this happen. But it has to benefit the organization too, or you are wasting your time. Because then it just becomes a thing for you.
People miss that part, right? So in this case, it was a £200,000 extra onto the portfolio I managed. And I said I was going to move one of my team members over to run it. So there was no downside for them doing it. It was like a no-brainer.
Yeah, who's going to turn down more business?
Yeah, and I made the mistake the first time by not going in there with that. It was just simply, I want to do more things. And they were like, well, why? I had no why. It was just like, I'm bored. That's not a good enough reason to do that. So I had to get sort of punched in the face the first time to realize what I'd done wrong in that situation.
The other cool thing about it, if you do it that way, where you take ownership and say, I'm going to put this together and I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to provide the solution, you learn and grow a lot more because you did it and you figured it out and you struggled through and you made it happen. And so you come out the other end a better person as well, as opposed to when it was all handed to you or set up for you and you've gotten that role, because you're not going to learn as much that way.
And the first one's always the toughest. So you do that one time, it's tough. I promise you every other time, it's a little bit easier. And easier and
it's like doing the show with Matt and Jill.
Yeah.
It's really...
And plus the people that you go to almost expect it from you now. And so it's okay. You become the Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley in the U.S. is an ex-basketball player who can clearly say anything on TV and nobody seems to care because it's Charles. And you in your organization, if you're the person that does that and shows results each time, you can become that person, and your boss will just look and go, oh, here comes Jill again. Wonder what it'll be this time. Probably will be good though. And that's okay.
No, I think that there is a theme to today's conversation overall. And it's ironic because I've recently been talking about it and posting about it and making videos about it. And it's this take the wheel. Take the wheel. That there's only one driver in any vehicle. And if you are not in the driver's seat of your career, someone else is. And sitting in the passenger seat and waiting for other people to tell you what your goals are, or tell you what you need to work on, or tell you what your next step should be, or tell you where you should move. They'll get to it when they get to it, but they're driving their career. So take the wheel, get in your own seat, and go for it. And, I think even amongst the four of us, there's so many stories and examples of times that someone else was trying to tell us what to do, and we moved over and got in the wheel, and sometimes went in a different direction, but regardless decided where it was that we were going to go. And that's kind of how we got to these places.
I think it's even more normal that if you don't have the wheel, nobody does. Nobody's actually driving. That's
what I was going to say. Yeah,
they're not driving for you. You think they are, but they are not. So if it is to be, it's up to me is the best way to approach that. And actually that's really empowering, because then you can go and chase the things that you want to go chase and that you want to do. And it is your life, so you should live it.
I realize that though, from how we've been brought up though, in most cases, your entire, from being a kid, from being told what to do by your parents, then going to school and being told what to do by your teachers and everything, we've kind of been set up to fail in that sense, where you've constantly been told how by different influences throughout your life how to do it. So then when it comes to your career, you're looking around for who's the next person. Your teacher was telling you how to do it, your parents, you're looking for that person in the workplace, and a lot of the time it doesn't exist unless you're very lucky and you have a manager that is built that way, that understands that his job, as you mentioned earlier, I am, my goal is to help people succeed, right? And I always had that in my old company where some of the other sales managers would say, why did you promote James? It means that you're no longer making money from him. Because I was a salesperson, I made commission of him, right? And everyone used to well, I just promoted James and now he's 17. That's what I measured on. But it's not normal though. Most people in most companies aren't gonna do that. So it's really interesting.
I think we do that to ourselves. Because I'm old enough that I grew up in a time, or I came out of school in a time where the paradigm was often get a job in a big company, they will take care of you, you will grow there, which most of your listeners probably think is the most bizarre thing in the world, but that's how we operate. And it took me 20 years to finally realize that, I can do other things besides just work for this big company and follow this path that I created for myself. So it's not just a student thing. It can hit you at any time in your life where you feel like you've invested this much time and this much effort into this thing. And if you switch, all of that will be wasted. And I'm living proof that it is not wasted. You bring it all with you to whatever your new thing is, and it informs and helps you with that. And it'll actually be really fun.
Yeah.
So it's not just a school thing. We can do it to ourselves too.
It's scary though, right? It's fear.
I did for a long time.
It's the big fear. Jill's going through it right now. I went through it when I stepped away. Shane did it, my business partner. You did it. It's fear in most cases. Every single person I ask that question, what is fear? Fear of what your friends and family are going to think. Fear of, a lot of time is actually fear of other people's opinion. Of than actually yourself. I read 99% of the time.
You know what has been buoying me, Chris? Because it's a great example, and I am living it right now. I just left the big job with the big office and this team and the
security of your the salary, the security that you have.
Yeah, right. I mean, I had the whole thing, but and there's a ton of fear. Believe me, a ton of fear. But what my biggest fear is? My biggest fear is, what if I don't do this?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what you have to ask, but a lot of people, it outweighs it in most cases.
What if I get to the end and I'm sitting in my old lady Jill rocking chair with a couple cats crawling over me or something? I don't like cats, and I never tried it, and I never ever found out if this was what I could do or was meant to do. And Jeff said it before. You can always go back. I can always go back and
exactly.
go back inside an organization, but I'm more afraid of what happens if I don't give this a shot.
So let me touch on my previous point, which is, are we sure that today is really as good as we think it is? If you're in a job right now that's highly technical, and highly repetitive, you should be asking yourself, where's this job's future 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road if you have that long in your career? Yeah. So fear of change, I understand it. We all experience it. Ask yourself, is this place that you're going to be really that secure? And I think for a lot of people, especially the disruption I'm seeing in a lot of industries, it's not. Yeah. So really, the impetus to develop new skills really could be ensuring that you are competitive going forward in a marketplace that's going to value different skill sets than is what has been valued over the previous 50 years. So if for no other reason, if you want to chase your opportunities, you want to chase experiences, you have an entrepreneurial slant, and you want to make some changes for those reasons, great. But I would also encourage you to ask yourself is, what's the other end of that risk, which is where you're standing now? Are you really on secure ground with your organization, in the role that you're in the function that you've chosen? Or would you benefit from having broader experience and being able to apply, as Jeff mentioned earlier, a lot of different skills to a very unique way of problem?
And you also then you control your own destiny. That's one of the things that I love now, is that I can come in the office and just do whatever I want in the best way. You know, if we have an idea, we can execute on it. If we get disrupted, I can move, I can innovate, I can pivot. But you know, if I'm in a role in a company with 10,000 employees, I can't really pivot that much. If something goes wrong and the company is disrupted, it's difficult to do that.
I think it comes down to, like, I've done plenty of things that I regret. Many.
Don't say coming on this show is one of them, all right?
Nope. But I whenever you do something and it turns out to have been a mistake, you have the opportunity to fix it, correct it, learn from it, make something better. You can do something with that. But if you're me or Jill someday, because I use the same analogy without the cats, you know, someday I will be sitting in a rocking chair and I will be looking back on my life, and I feel sure that the things that I will regret most are the things that I didn't do or didn't try to do, because those you can't get back. That's all over with. But if you tried it and it didn't work, you can make something of that and it can be okay. And so that, to me, I think is the bigger thing. It's, you know, and I love the idea of, is where you are right now as good as you think it is? And if you really take a clear-eyed, full hearts can't lose, Friday Night Lights reference, of that situation, usually it's not. It's just comfortable. And so
dangerous place to be, comfortable.
So take a look and say, you know, how will I feel if someday I look back and I didn't try to do this? And the answer to that is probably you'll feel like crap. And so give it a go. And you don't have to go all in. You don't have to jump off the bridge. You don't have to jettison everything. You can do something on the side. There's all kinds of ways to explore it and see whether it makes sense. But explore it and make sense. Yeah, see what happens.
Gary Vaynerchuk says something all the time on his videos, and he always says, if you ever want to see regret, go and visit your local old people's home. He says it with obviously a bit of laughter, and right. At the same time, he's like, if you ever visit an old person's home and go in there, what you hear, the stories is regret. What if?
Right.
And
and the what ifs you can't do anything about. No. That didn't work out so well. Well, you can do something with that. And oftentimes that turns out to be what takes you to a much better place.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap up, guys, that one of the things I want to talk about, which in my career always was a challenge, was, and my boss would, Chris, your job's to motivate your people. I remember hearing that all the time. Chris, you need to motivate your people. And there were certain people that I'm like, I just can't motivate this person. Do we believe that you can motivate everyone? Or like, because there's a conversation I hear, and I don't believe you can. I think there's some people that you just can't motivate, and you just have to like manage out of the organization. But I'm interested to get your guys' thoughts on that as leaders of many people, of course. So start with you, Matt. Pick on you first.
Awesome. So the answer to your question, I think, is no. If the individual who you are working with on your team doesn't have an interest and isn't motivated themselves, then no amount of effort that you're going to exert as a leader is likely going to change that, and the inertia is likely too strong. However, I firmly believe that if the individual is ambivalent or preferably really positive about the experience of working and developing, absolutely. I think sometimes leaders struggle, though, is with people who are motivated but not like them. So they have a tough time relating to that individual and how they're motivated. And in those cases, the best course of action is always just to ask the person, have a conversation. People are people. If you sit down with somebody and have that discussion about what do you need to feel successful, what do you need to be engaged and be motivated, people will often tell you what that is, and then you can work and collaborate on what that action plan looks like, and then have touch points along the way to make sure, are you living up to your end of the bargain, and are they as well as the employee?
I would jump in and I would say, I think I'm closer to yes with a small caveat. I think that there are some people who are struggling through things that are very serious, and they might be in a place where they can't find motivation. I also believe that it is not the leader's job to motivate other people. I believe it is the leader's job to find the right buttons to push or levers to pull to motivate their team. And Matt stole my answer, which is, to me, it's the hardest thing with the easiest answer. Just ask. If you ask a person, what motivates you? Those 3 words, the answer can be amazing. And the biggest myth out there, and the trap that I see managers fall into the most, is that people are things that motivate me. And so if I am just dying for a promotion, I am more likely to try to promote people on my team, but I might be missing the fact that this person really just cares about compensation. This person just wants more time with her family. This person just wants to go get that certification. This person wants more one-on-one time with me. And there are hundreds and hundreds of motivators. So don't assume that people are motivated by what you are, because that's an easy way out. And ask the question, period.
Great. Jeff?
My answer is a little bit more nuts and boltsy. I think you do have to know your folks, and you have to know what motivates them in a broader sense. But the best way, I think, to help motivate people and keep them interested and enthused is to provide the tools, resources, whatever you want to say, and the opportunities for them to have small successes. Because when you do something and you succeed at it, you feel good about it, even if it's not something you even enjoy. Because I've done plenty of stuff that I don't enjoy, but I actually feel good about the fact that I was able to pull it off, like my year of 100,000 push-ups. Didn't enjoy that. Felt pretty good about it. So, yeah, another story. But putting your team, instead of trying to find maybe this lever or that button to push or whatever, you just look and say, okay, how can I create an environment and create situations where this person sees some success in whatever it is that they are supposed to be doing? How do I help them get better at this? Because that will make them feel good. That makes you feel better. Whenever you feel like you do something well, you typically like it more. And when you like something, you're motivated to do it more. So it creates that cool little flywheel. So, and that's especially true in jobs that are not necessarily, intellectual property type jobs, where there is some repetition and there is some routine and organization. If you can find ways for them to be successful at that and do well at that, that is motivating in and of itself. I worked in a mindless profession for a number of years. Running equipment, once you know how to run it, you're just hammering away. But being good at it made me feel good about it, and I was motivated to keep being good at that. So I would say, to add to what everybody else said, find ways to help your people be successful, even in really small ways, because that'll make them feel better about themselves, and that will help them find the motivation in themselves. You can never place it totally in someone, but you can help them develop it inside themselves.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a good, well, as always, guys, our half an hour turned into 1 hour.
I'm sure that's my fault.
No, honestly, this is a great conversation today. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jeff. My mind's already, I've got so much to take in personally, and I can't wait to share this with our wider audience. There's so many.
Cool. It was my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, from everyone, from Matt, from Jill as well. I think this is one of our, I'm just saying this out loud, I think it's one of our best shows so far. So I'm really excited to share this.
Why isn't it the best show? Come on now. Why isn't it the best show? What are you talking about?
Because you didn't show us your view on the live stream, unless you want to do it now quickly.
Can you see?
Oh, look at that. All right, now everyone's just jealous now. That's all if you need a bit of motivation, that's all you need there every morning, just to wake up and look at that outside the window.
Yeah, it is pretty cool, I must admit.
Well, look, guys, thank you for tuning in today. As always, make sure you subscribe to the show so you'll be notified next time we go live. And also drop your questions in the description. I'm sure Jeff will be happy to answer them. I've just thrown him in the deep end now to answer some more questions on there. Of course, if you want to learn more about Jeff, you can catch him on LinkedIn there. Also, where can we learn more about you, Jeff, and grab a copy of the book? What's the best place?
Well, nobody's going to want to learn more about me, but I write for Inc. So if you go to Inc.com and just search my name, you'll see about 1,500 articles. I am on LinkedIn, and I do connect with people, and if you reach out to me, I will not give you Richard Branson's email address, but I will correspond, and if I can help you, then I certainly will. And my book is available wherever fine books are sold.
Okay, I'll do a link to Amazon then. We'll keep it simple. Apart from that, guys, I wish you all the best until we next speak, and see you all again next Wednesday, same time, same people.
Thanks for having me.
See you later.